Brittany Griner is a political prisoner? She's black, and she's openly gay, and she's a WNBA player. This situation requires nuance. They don't want to make her seem more valuable. We're talking about Brittany Griner.
Exactly. We're talking about BG.
The only answer is through public outcry. You're dealing with a dictator.
Why are so many U.S. conservatives coming to Hungary?
I don't know why, but I know that it's dangerous.
The U.S. Republican Party has been all talk and no action. When you have power, you have to use it.
Viktor Orban is a prime minister who's used undemocratic tactics to maintain power. So you're coming here to learn a new conservatism?
I think it could be a winning model for Republicans.
In the WNBA also play overseas. But this year, one of the top American players in the EuroLeague is sitting in a Russian jail.
ABC News has learned that WNBA player and two-time USA gold medalist Brittany Griner is detained in Russia for allegedly having vape cartridges. Russia's main state-run news channel is now showing this photo.
Seven-time WNBA All-Star and 2014 champion Brittany Griner was arrested on drug charges in the Moscow airport on February 17th. Her arrest came just as the world was bracing for the invasion of Ukraine. But weeks passed before Russian officials announced her detainment.
В отношении гражданки США возбуждено уголовное дело. Контрабанда наркотических средств в значительном размере.
You know, I've played with BG overseas, and you know, I was scared for her. My stomach dropped. You know, I teared up. It hit hard, and it hit hard because it literally could have been any of us.
Brianne January and Kayla McBride have played with and against Griner over the last decade, both at home and abroad.
We are constantly coming into different countries, and you know, we're here by ourselves, and it just brings us back to, you know, why she was in that situation.
Can you talk a little bit about why so many WNBA players do play overseas in the off-season?
It comes with playing professional women's basketball, just to supplement income. That's the hardest thing to think about, is that she feels like she has to still be over here.
We're talking about Brittany Griner. Like,
exactly. We're talking about BG. We're talking about, you know, like, All-Star, you know, USA gold Olympians. Like, it's crazy to think that she feels like she still has to go over there. This all could have been avoided if we could stay home and make a living in the W.
Slam dunk Brittany Griner.
The average WNBA player makes about $120,000 a year in a career that only lasts a few years. Playing abroad lets them make the most of their earning potential. Griner is a top talent, earning the WNBA's max salary of $228,000. But UMMC Ekaterinburg, where she's played since 2014, reportedly pays her $1 million a year. She was arrested while returning to Russia to play. At the direction of the State Department, the WNBA stayed relatively quiet during the first few weeks of her incarceration.
The word among Women's Basketball League is that the players should not make a, quote, big fuss.
It was very important for us to be intentional about doing the best thing to ensure that we don't compromise her coming home.
Obviously, we're in a very complex geopolitical situation with Russia, Ukraine. Obviously, we're getting a ton of support from the government, and I know the players have been amazing at following the advice that they're getting and we're getting in order not to jeopardize her safety in any way.
With limited facts, the motivation behind Griner's arrest became the subject of intense media speculation.
What a coincidence. It's just now, during this war, that they are detaining her and finding something.
The Russians are notorious for planting
drugs, a black woman over 6 feet tall, of queer identity, high dangerous stakes for Brittany. We have to get this sister home.
I think the fact that we've seen this escalation, the declaration of war in Ukraine, and the American, response to that, all of these could exacerbate her case. Kimberly St. Julian Barnon is a researcher at the University of Pennsylvania who has studied the history of race relations in the Soviet Union. Do you think that the way it's been covered in American media, that there was kind of just this automatic knee-jerk reaction or assumption that she was being treated differently because of her identity? Within a week, everyone was kind of talking about, okay, she's black and she's openly gay and she's a WNBA player. They kind of put all of her identities together. What worried me was she's a political pawn and this is all a scam. And I'm like, we can't say things like that when we don't have any information about her case. This situation requires nuance. And so a lot of people have said, well, if this was Tom Brady or, another famous white athlete, we would, be sending in the troops. And that's not true. America has always been very careful with how it deals with Americans that are in Russian custody. The process has kind of always been allow the Russian legal process to work. The fact that they released her mugshot and a video of the search at the airport, what does that tell you about how they might be handling her? What message might they be trying to send by releasing that? I think it is proof of life. And I think the video of her going to the courtroom and you see she's well dressed, she's clean, her hair is done. All those are Russia strategically releasing information to show she's okay and we're not mistreating her because they know American eyes are on them. And I think social media, especially Black Twitter, has helped keep profile on her. And I think that's something people need to remember. This isn't a TV show. This is the next 5 to 10 years of her existence that could be in a Russian prison cell. The Russian legal system differs greatly from the US. Most cases never see a jury and are decided solely by a judge. Griner was arrested under broadly written drug laws that have been aggressively used to target journalists and political activists and often carry lengthy sentences. Sergei Davidis led the Political Prisoner Support Program at Memorial Human Rights Center in Moscow. Davidis fled at the onset of the war in Ukraine. Can you walk us through what Brittany is up against as far as how her case will play out?
Российскому судье достаточно гораздо меньших оснований для того, чтобы счесть человека виновным. Защита гораздо более ограничена в возможностях собирать и предоставлять доказательства.
Do you believe Brittany Griner is being held as a political prisoner?
Everything became possible after Putin decided to assault Ukraine. Today we see a lot of unpredictable things. Usually somebody has these cartridges. I do not think that they're searching for them in the luggage, especially when it's a high-level sport person. They did it intentionally, obviously. So I think there are some political motivation.
Whenever an American is detained anywhere in the world, we of course stand ready to provide every possible assistance, and that includes in Russia.
In 2020, following the death of a CIA agent in Iranian custody, the U.S. codified when the government can pursue the release of its citizens being held abroad. Typically, the U.S. allows the Russian legal system to run its course. But on May 3rd, the State Department officially designated Griner as being wrongfully detained.
Our son was taken prisoner by Russia because of his service to this president and the former president.
One of the only other recent high-profile detainments in Russia was former Marine and presidential guard Trevor Reed.
Trevor is sick. He's really sick. Probably has an active case of TB, possibly a broken rib. We need to get our son home so that he can get medical care and he can get back on with his life.
Reed was arrested in 2019 after a drunken incident involving an alleged assault on a police officer in Moscow. He was convicted in July of 2020 and sentenced to 9 years in prison. The State Department called his trial, quote, theater of the absurd. Over the last 3 years, the Reeds tirelessly campaigned for his release.
I spent 14 months in Moscow for my son's trial. So we've seen the prisons. I've been at the prisons at all times of day and night, the pre-detention centers, which are horrible.
And that's where she's at.
And that's nothing compared to the prison camp that, she will end up in.
So do you think being as vocal as you all have been and coming out and demonstrating in front of the White House has led to any progress?
We're not sure, but we're hoping so.
We believe the only answer is a prisoner trade, and the only way to get that done, especially now, is through public outcry.
Just a few weeks after we spoke, the Biden administration was able to secure Reed's freedom in exchange for Konstantin Yaroshenko, a Russian held in U.S. prison since 2011. In a scene reminiscent of the Cold War, the two crossed paths on the tarmac as they headed back to their respective countries. In one of the only public comments made since Griner's arrest, her wife Sherelle took to Instagram the day Reed was released to celebrate his return. We've heard that the strategy is they don't want to make her seem more valuable, right? And make it more difficult to get her home. What do you think about that?
Well, we kind of thought the same thing with Trevor having been a presidential guard, but it doesn't really matter. He's an American, and that right there makes him valuable. And so she's valuable to them no matter what because she's an American.
It's up to each family and each individual how they handle the situation. We just want her family to know that it's not that we can imagine what she's going through. We pretty much know what she's going through.
We know what she's going through. It's a horrible thing.
After designating Griner as wrongfully detained, the State Department is now leading an effort to secure her release. Meanwhile, Griner's pretrial detention has been extended as Russian investigators prepare to present their findings before a judge. While her fate remains uncertain, we do know that as recently as 2018, Russian courts had a conviction rate of over 99%. The charges being brought against Griner carry a sentence of up to 10 years in prison. If you could send a message to Brittany right now, what would you say to her?
Just that, you know, we're praying for you, we love you, stay strong, and that we'll never be able to know what she feels inside, but whenever she does get home, we're going to be here for her, and whatever she needs, we got her.
This is CPAC, the largest annual gathering of conservatives from across the U.S.
2022 will be the year that millions of everyday citizens stand up to the left-wing fascists.
More than a year after Trump lost the election, and with midterms on the horizon, Republicans are looking for inspiration for the future of their party, and an unlikely country has emerged as the epicenter of a new global conservative movement. Hungary.
Here in America, as well as in my beloved country, Hungary, we embrace the true values of our Western civilization, God, our homeland, and the family, the way we have always done before. Protecting the children is what's at stake in the upcoming Hungarian election in early April, where conservatives are led by one of the true champions of liberty, a man you know well, Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
Viktor Orban became prime minister in 2010, and he's ruled the country guided by the belief that Hungary can only be saved from immigration and multiculturalism by restoring its Christian identity.
Európa és Magyarország egy civilizációs küzdelem kellős közepén áll. Európa már most invázió alatt áll.
During the global refugee crisis in 2015, Orban implemented the harshest anti-refugee measures in the European Union. His government prosecuted asylum seekers from the Middle East and built a border wall to prevent them from entering Hungary. His tough stance on immigration catapulted him into the limelight and made him a conservative hero in the U.S. culture wars.
Of the nearly 200 different countries on the face of the earth, precisely one of them has an elected leader who publicly identifies as a Western-style conservative. His name is Viktor Orban.
Viktor Orban has done a tremendous job in so many different ways. Probably, like me, a little bit controversial, but that's okay.
Now, right-wing Americans, many on fellowships backed in part by the Hungarian government, are flocking to Budapest, hoping to export the Orban model back to the U.S.
Well, welcome to Budapest.
Stephen Scholl is one such fellow. He's here to study how Orban's government is presenting itself as a defender of traditional values by restoring Budapest's classical architecture.
What is a more visual depiction of your ideology, of your culture, of your society, than the architecture you see? Why wouldn't I want to be surrounded by beautiful buildings like this? That remind me of where I came from, great stories of the past.
Why is there an appeal to the past?
For many people, appealing to the past builds a level of importance. It is reminding people that, you come from a great line of people.
Who are these gentlemen on horseback coming down the street who are clearly dressed like they're not from this time period?
They're obviously reenactors. It's kind of part of that harkening back to Hungarian tradition.
What is it about Budapest, about Hungary, that is making it so appealing to U.S. conservatives like yourself?
Hungary is a place where policies can be put into practice. I think there's a lot of feelings in conservative circles that, Trump's talked a lot and then didn't actually do a lot. So I think there's a perception in Orban that don't just talk about something, but concretely do.
So what are some of those policies that you would want to take from Hungary and bring back to the U.S.?
I think for me, one of the main ones would be the family policy. I think that a functional family is one of the most beautiful things in the world.
For decades, small government has defined the U.S. Republican Party. But Hungary is demonstrating that it's easier to implement conservative policies with the full might of the government, like population decline, which many European countries are facing, including Hungary. The Orban government has chosen to address the issues by giving straight families financial incentives to, make more Hungarians.
Köszönjük szépen, és akkor kezdődjön is a bemelegítés.
Nora Kirali is a mother who benefits from the family policy. With 5 children of her own, she'll never pay income tax again. She's also running for parliament as a member of Orban's Fidesz party. What are the issues that are important for you in your campaign?
Hát ugye a családok támogatása, az egyik legfontosabb, a közbiztonság, az, hogy nincsen itt Magyarországon migráció.
We've heard a lot about this family policy. Can you explain what it is exactly?
Kormányzás központjában a családok állnak. Ugye van olyan ország, aki a külföldiek betelepítésével próbálja elérni azt, hogy több gyermek szülessen. Gondolok itt a migrációra. Ugye Magyarországon a magyar kormány nem a migrációval akarja elérni ezt, hanem a magyar családok támogatásával.
In your opinion, what's the problem with increasing the population through policies like migration?
Mert azt szeretnénk, hogy a magyarok megmaradjanak abban az értékrendben, és hát az, hogy más vallású, más nemzetiségű emberek teljesen más kultúrával tömegesen bevándorolnak ide Magyarországra, de hát ugye ez egy olyan dolog, amit nem lehet már visszafordítani.
The far-right ideas that Hungary has become known for are exchanged here at the Scrutin Cafe, a popular spot for U.S. conservatives and their Hungarian counterparts. Tonight, Scholl is hosting an event with Rod Dreher, another American fellow in Hungary.
So I want to ask you, Rod, what do you think is the biggest lie that is currently going around our society today?
I think the most consequential one is the loss of the gender binary, the idea that gender is fluid and that male can be female, female can be male. But this is the tyranny of minorities.
Dreher is a senior editor of the American Conservative magazine and a New York Times best-selling author. His latest book, which slams what he calls the totalitarianism of woke culture in the U.S., has just been published in Hungary. What is your vision for the future of U.S. society?
What I would like to see is a society that is anti-woke, a society that values freedom of expression, freedom of religion, basically America like I grew up in. If you come over here to Hungary, you'll find that you can get a much more respectful hearing for your ideas here in this conservative country than back in America.
So you're coming here to learn from this kind of, can I call it a new conservatism that's been created by the Orban government?
The traditional conservative thinking, if tradition goes back to Ronald Reagan, is that the small government is what we want. Well, that is so outdated. Orban is not like that. He is a conservative, but he's not afraid to use the power of the state to achieve certain goals.
Zoltán Kovács has been Orban's spokesperson since 2015.
The unrelenting devotion to the national cause is probably the key to understanding Mr. Orban's policy making and political decision making and implementation. It's easy to talk about things, but it's always very difficult actually to decide and implement. If something is decided, to be able to effectuate it, you need time.
But 12 years is quite a long time for one government, for one prime minister.
12 years is a long time, but 20 or 30 years is even more meaningful.
People might say that that's authoritarian for someone to rule a country for that long.
I can tell you that our perspective is very different. We have an experience, we have lessons, we can share these lessons and others can learn from it.
But for Orban's critics, those lessons involve eroding democracy in order to stay in power. His government has gerrymandered districts, stacked courts, changed electoral laws, and taken control of state media. Although these changes have made it very hard for him to lose, Peter Markizai is galvanizing the opposition.
12 év agymosás után azonban én azt mondom önöknek, most vasárnap valódi esély van arra, hogy Orbán Viktort eltakarítsuk. Hogy ezeket a hazaárulókat leváltsuk Magyarország élén.
Does democracy exist in Hungary right now?
No, we won't call it a democracy at all. You may not call it a dictatorship, but it's definitely at least an authoritarian regime. A regime where Orbán built up an elaborate system in which he can never be defeated, he can never be replaced, he will always rule.
You must be familiar with the fact that there are many U.S. conservatives coming here to learn from Orban's style of governance. Why do you think that is?
I don't know why that is, but I know that it's dangerous. You should take care of your democracy because fortunately enough you have your checks and balances. If somebody is able to switch them off, you would also slide down. This is what happened to Hungary, and I really hope that your system, the 200-year-old American democracy, which I admire, is strong enough to withstand any such threats.
Not only are U.S. conservatives not heeding Markizai's warnings, they're embracing the most controversial aspects of Orban's rule. Harvard scholar Gladden Papin is a senior fellow at a government-backed Hungarian university. What do you want to take from this country and bring back to the U.S.?
American conservatives have some anxiety about using power when they have it, which ultimately I think is their undoing. Orban is a no-bullshit politician who has both the vision to, establish and defend Hungary as a traditional Christian society.
He's a controversial figure in Europe. That's undeniable.
Yes,
he's controversial for a certain reason.
Yes, he's controversial because he rejects the liberalism part of liberal democracy. As an anti-liberal, I think that that's good.
Does being anti-liberal mean doing things like changing the Constitution in your favor?
Yes, obviously. We should pass into the U.S. Constitution anything that is, fundamentally required in order to protect the things that have been taken away by other forms of legislation or by the Supreme Court. And I don't think we're at risk of having a highly intolerant, right-wing or conservative society. We're at risk of, because we already have, a highly intolerant liberal society.
While many conservatives claim to be under attack in America, the Orban model is gaining steam in the U.S. as policies rooted in a traditional definition of faith and family spread across the country.
Governor Ron DeSantis has signed into law what critics call the Don't Say Gay bill. There isn't just the Florida Don't Say Gay bill. Republicans are trying to make 2022 the year of the anti-trans bill.
And it's not just the policies that are changing. Institutions are getting overhauled in the conservative image as well.
The draft of the Supreme Court's opinion shows the court overturning Roe v. Wade in a blistering ruling.
It situates the trajectory of the American right to make us in the image of Hungarian illiberal democracy.
For Americans in Hungary, this year's parliamentary election is the affirmation of Orban's style of governing and validation of their belief that U.S. conservatives have something to learn from Hungary.
The Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orbán, has secured a fourth consecutive landslide election victory.
Kedves barátaim, hatalmas győzelmet arattunk. Győzelmünkért jó szívvel gondolunk az amerikai barátainkra, akik velünk voltak és segítettek bennünket az elmúlt hónapokban.
The three of us here, we're all from the U.S. It's a much different country. Do you think there are elements of Orban's style of government in Hungary that could work back in the U.S.?
I'd say that the Child Protection Act in Hungary was definitely an inspiration for DeSantis and other Republican governors. I think Hungary's migration policy should be pursued by Republican politicians. I think the United States could learn a lot from that in terms of border control policies, in terms of messaging.
What does Viktor Orban's re-election tonight mean for conservatives in the U.S.?
I think it'll continue to heighten American conservative interest in what Fidesz and the Orban government are doing. I'm thrilled. It's good to see countries like Hungary that don't hate themselves and don't want to destroy the essence of civilization.
Shouldn't we be moving forward now to a time where we can be more inclusive of all kinds of people.
Inclusion is basically a bullshit word which is used to exclude, traditional morality, the traditional family, the traditional male-female families. There's no world in which the family and the opposite of the family can really coexist. It's a battle. One or the other has to win.